Native Americans in Florida called it Paheoki, or grassy waters. Journalist Marjorie Stoneman Douglas dubbed it the River of Grass. And there's a group of South Florida creatives who call the Everglades their second home.
I think the biggest misconception that people need to overcome is the idea that it's just a swampy wasteland. It couldn't be farther from the truth.
The 1.5 million acre national park is an integral part of life beyond Florida's sandy beaches and bustling nightlife.
It's the only place like it, and it's our national park and our own backyard.
It provides fresh drinking water, habitats for hundreds of species of wildlife, and protection from hurricanes and flooding.
You know, there's just so much life crammed into these little pockets.
For these artists, the Everglades is their main source of inspiration.
This has been a place for me to kind of settle down and really get to know, and there's a lot of places to explore here.
Plein Air painter Linda Apriletti considers it her studio away from home.
Plein air painting it's a French term for painting outdoors. Plein air means painting in the open air. A lot of the Impressionists, they painted that way, and it's become much more of a movement again here in the United States. To paint plein air, it's a more immediate response, but it's also a great tool for getting the feel of an area and the colors and all that a camera can't record, because it loses the colors and the shadow and just the emotion of what's going on. And it's difficult. It's definitely much different painting outside than in your controlled environment in the studio, because you've got all the elements. You've got wind, insects, rain, the light changes. It's like when you're outdoors, you're out there painting, you've got the birds singing and the bugs flying into your paint on you. Things like that going on.
Despite crossing paths with some intimidating wildlife, Apriletti remains dedicated to capturing the beauty of such an unpredictable environment.
I know a time or two when I was painting and kind of took a break and stepped away and looked down like in this kind of culvert, like right near where I was, and the huge head of an alligator. I mean, it's huge, and he kind of backed in. So that made me a lot more aware of what was going on. I'm showing the beauty that's out there, because a lot of people just like maybe drive past and it's a bunch of dead grass or these spindly looking cypress trees, and there's a lot more out there if you spend time. And it's not like a lot of other national parks where you've got big mountains and something big and grand or huge waterfalls or things. It's got like a real subtle beauty.
Most artists just sign their work, but Apriletti takes it a step further.
I mean, I'll tell them like how they can get to that place. On some of my paintings, I'll put the GPS location so someone can go and find that palm hammock that I painted. But yeah, I often describe to people where my paintings are from, and I've had them come back later and say, oh, I've been there and it looks just like that. And so it's kind of cool.
All right, this is good. Yeah. So no waving of hands. I'm going to spotlight up there. I always needed kind of an artistic outlet. So in high school, I painted. In college, with the dorm room and all that, and a friend that was also into photography, picked up a camera, and mainly it was just like trying to shoot cool portfolio shots of ourselves for Facebook, this new thing that was out. You know, when you first start with photography, you're learning the ropes and you do a little bit of everything, but I'd always tended towards the outdoors and nature. And then when I graduated, moved back to Miami and started shooting the Everglades.
After winning a photo contest that sent Marcellini to Kenya for a 10-day safari, he was sold on pursuing photography as a career.
I've gotten lucky, but the one thing I kind of thought was, okay, I know I'm not the best photographer. I know I'm not going to stand out in front of everybody. So, kind of big fish, little pond mentality. I was just like, if I get known for something. Back then, like, people would joke, like, oh, that's one of those Marciel Skies. Like, if I got known for something, it was just really colorful sunsets, because I was just out more than most people.
Marcellini spent countless hours slogging through miles of wetlands, typically in his bare feet, trying to get the perfect shot. Eventually, his dedication paid off when one of his Marciel Skies was chosen to represent Everglades National Park on a forever stamp.
Florida as a state, like, all the habitats interest me, and so, in the broader sense, I love Florida, but the Everglades is always my home. It's what I cut my teeth on, and it's the habitat I know the most. Yeah, I mean, the Everglades is definitely going to be in my future, and it's always going to be somewhere that I go to.
If you don't know about something, you just don't care about it. And if you don't care about it, you're not going to protect it. And that all starts with education.
The concept that change begins with children is at the heart of natural history filmmaker Richard Kern's film lecture series called Encounters in Excellence. The school program highlights the vast biodiversity of local habitats like the Everglades.
With my work, the ultimate goal of the documentaries are to educate and inspire a new generation, to show them how exceptional a place like the Everglades actually is when you can dip your toe into the crystal clear water of the river of grass, to show them the amazing mystery of the metamorphosis of a dragonfly or even a mosquito, something that they may think is so mundane, is actually incredibly complex and fascinating. And sometimes it takes showing that visually for them to understand. And that's the ultimate satisfaction I get when I can see the results of my labor, in the faces of these kids.
In order to capture compelling footage for his projects, Kern regularly comes face to face with creatures that most people have nightmares about. One of the most common is the American alligator. While he admits that there is plenty of danger to be had, he argues that the threat from wildlife in the Everglades is often exaggerated.
So what I would say to people who would like to experience the Everglades in person but are afraid of things like the alligators and snakes, absolutely, the Everglades is full of alligators and snakes, but I-95 is full of human beings. And I've had more life and death experiences with human beings in traffic in Miami. We forget that we surround ourselves in this structured civilization with danger every day, much more than wading through a cypress stone. Most of these animals are more afraid of us than we are of them. We need to recenter our view of wildlife. There's no limit to how many good programs you can add. I think education is critical to building an informed population of South Floridians who know how things should work and understand the importance of preserving places like the Everglades for generations to come.
It's super rare. but they all look alike, It's just like, why am I doing this? It looks just like the other ones, but, they are all different species.
The wildlife offered by the Everglades intrigues most visitors, but for Roger Hammer, the plants are far more fascinating. The self-taught botanist knows the local flora like the back of his hand and can't help but identify all the greenery that comes his way.
This is the passion flower here. It's a slash pine, Camacrysta deringiana, named after Charles. This thing here, this is smilax. You can break off this whole new growth right here and eat that. It tastes like asparagus. See, this is gumbo limbo here, and here's poisonwood. So see those, that if you're out here naked and afraid, that would be something you would not want to be eaten. Holy moly. Here's an orchid.
Hammer's vast knowledge has allowed him to author a series of nature field guides, receive an honorary doctorate of science, and work as a survivalist instructor on the television series Naked and Afraid. Even after a lifetime of experiences in nature, the Army veteran still remembers how his passion first began.
I was in the Army from 1965 to 68. When I got out, I moved down to the Miami area and took a job with the University of Miami. And at that time, in 1972, a book came out called The Native Orchids of Florida. And I just got enthralled with the fact that there was 102 orchids in Florida. I was vaguely familiar with one of them, the butterfly orchid, but none of the others. So I just kind of went on a mission to find these orchids, and now there's 110 orchids that are native to the state of Florida, and I've photographed 96 of them. So it's mainly just been a work in progress of just hunting down all these native orchids and photographing them in the wild. Here's a young plant of it. That's it right there.
Hammer became the senior naturalist for Miami-Dade County's Parks and Recreation Department, a job that further fueled his mission to find and identify Florida orchids.
Even on my days off, I would go out in the Everglades and look at wildflowers, and then when I was working, I would take people out in the Everglades and look at wildflowers. So it was kind of a non-stop thing. It wasn't something like, this is work and this is fun. It was like all sort of combined together. Orchids were my first love of wildflowers. I was like everybody else. I would just wade through these prairies and woods where there's lots of other wildflowers, but my intent was to find orchids, and I was always on a mission when I went out looking for them. I knew what I was looking for, and I wanted to find it. I don't know what it was about orchids. It just sort of intrigued me. People don't realize how widespread they are in cold, temperate climates, and even down here.
Despite the large number of orchids found in the Everglades, they can be very elusive to the untrained eye.
That word orchid gets people excited for one reason or another, and most of the native orchids aren't super big, showy orchids. Some of them are, but most of them are little tiny, insignificant wildflowers that you wouldn't, you'd walk right by and never pay a second glance to them, But once you get an eye for orchids, you can see them amongst other wildflowers. There's something about them that stands out, and I've gotten that eye. I mean, when I was first dating my wife, Marciel, we would be driving along, and I would come to a screeching halt and back up, and she would go, "What?" And I would say, "Oh, look, there's an orchid," and there'd be a little tiny spiranthes with little spikes this tall on the side of the road that I saw, doing 60 miles an hour down the road. So you kind of get an eye for them after a while.
Two of Hammer's books identify all of the wildflowers found in the Everglades, as well as in the entire state of Florida. An accomplishment that he is reminded of when he comes across other plant enthusiasts following in his footsteps.
This has been a place for me to kind of settle down and really get to know, and there's a lot of places to explore here that's, kept me going. Yeah, it's always nice when I go out in Everglades National Park and I see some people walking along with one of my books in their hand trying to figure out wildflowers, But yeah, it's going to be a legacy I can leave behind and feel proud of, that I've, helped people, educate themselves about wild Florida and get out there and be able to identify wildflowers.